Good morning, everybody. My name is Courtnay Zeitler, and along with my teammates, Heidi Syler and Linnea Minich, we would like to share with you the ways that we sought to establish and maintain community during a time when our community had, by necessity and in crisis, been disbanded by COVID. Thanks for attending our presentation, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Heidi, Linnea, and I are librarians at the University of the South, informally and affectionately known as Sewanee. We are a small liberal arts college and Episcopal seminary and have approximately 1,800 students. The town of Sewanee is the university and vice versa. So the president of the school is also the mayor of the town. We're very tight-knit. Sewanee is a special place. Its geography, buildings, and welcoming atmosphere are baked into the curriculum. Context and community are important to every Sewanee student. Our stone buildings, miles of mountain trails, close relationships with faculty. We stress face-to-face relationships, in person, in real time. I may be biased, but the heart of the school, no doubt, is our university library, DuPont. It's a popular gathering place for students because of its open spaces. There's a silent floor for the serious scholars, and because it houses a number of student services, a 24-hour computer lab, the Writing Center, the Center for Speaking and Listening, the Ralston Music Library, the Cup and Gown Cafe, and of course, research help. So the three of us had just come together as a team in January 2020. Our work included teaching an intro to academic research class, meeting with students who needed help with research projects, and consulting with faculty members who could request a one-shot instruction or specialized research skills session. Heidi and I had worked together previously in a limited capacity, and Linnea was brought in December with teaching and library experience from UTC, University of Tennessee in Chattanooga. From my perspective, I really enjoyed being part of a new team. I like the feel of our newly constructed space, our camaraderie and collaboration, and I could see us doing great things.
So this timeline represents kind of the course of our last 15 months of the pandemic. In March 2020, like most people, our classes moved entirely online. And it wasn't until May of 2020 that we felt like we had time to take a breath and start planning. Our summer was dedicated to creating a presence for ourselves, which we'll talk about more, our new faculty orientation in August, followed by a fall and a spring of online, in-person, and hybrid classes. As we move into our in-person fall in 2021, we're spending this summer reflecting on what we've learned and how we can apply these things to making our learning more effective. The two questions that we asked ourselves throughout the pandemic were, how can we create a community presence in an online environment? And how can we keep learning active and engaging in a mostly online environment?
So my role here is to focus on Research Help's effort to connect in the classroom. I want to take you back 15 months. We all have ways we process the pandemic, right? Both as persons and as professionals. For me, the start of COVID happened when we were at a library conference in Knoxville, Tennessee. It was March 11th through the 13th. Some of our colleagues from other schools were summoned back to their campuses. And I had two of my own kids in college who were texting me in all caps, "What is happening?" All I could tell them is that I love you and I'll be home tomorrow. Professionally, I knew we'd have to scramble to adopt new technologies and practices, but what was most important to me was finding ways to keep our class community together, to continue the conversation about research, and to be the reassuring grown-up in the room who is constantly reminding them, yes, this is very hard and we can do hard things. So the way that I break up 2020 in my head, for everybody it's different, but 3 terms, 3 modes of action. So slice 1, saving summer. Let's do what we can to salvage the semester. I'm sorry, saving spring, I beg your pardon. Everyone got a Zoom account. We delivered content asynchronously in Blackboard, and we adjusted the final project with fewer requirements. This was a final project they were constructing in the midst of a crisis, and I wanted to be ever mindful of what scholarship while being bewildered might look like. Thus, my first concern was establishing and maintaining contact with our kids. I could see how the pandemic's unknowns had frozen many of us in fear. And in my own home, my daughter was getting ready to graduate from Sewanee, and I had a son at another college who thought he was coming home for spring break when he was really coming home for the whole summer. And so I went back and I found an email, my first reaching out to the students. And the first paragraph went like this. Hello, students. Everything has changed. I know we are all reeling from our current health crisis, and this affects our standing as children, siblings, friends, and students. For those of you who are seniors, I know the scenario is one you never imagined could play out as you finish your final semester at the university. What has not changed is our commitment to persevere through the next 4 weeks. Library 101 is open for business, and as your instructors, we are here to teach, encourage, and guide through this last part of class. Yes, we are all home and scattered at the same time, but we can wrest research excellence from all of this chaos. So during spring break, my daughter, who was a senior at Sewanee, made a comment that caused a seismic shift in my intentions for the last 4 weeks of class. She said, I didn't know I was losing my community when we left for break. So I had this light bulb moment. She was in mourning and trying to write a thesis at the same time. What she needed was to keep showing up and complete her semester. And as equally important, she needed tacit permission from her professors to not be the best version of her scholar self. Heidi, I'm going to ask you to go back one more because I just want to stress this. This is the phrase that I have repeated over and over, at least once a day. My colleagues are sick of hearing it. My kids are sick of hearing it, but it has worked well in the way that I approach class and need to have my students approach me as well. Lots of grace, lots of mercy. I'm going to extend it when it needs to be extended, and I'm going to ask it of you when I need it as well. So my final paragraph for the email that I sent out to my kids, I printed it up here, but I wanted you to see, so while I was their teacher, you can see by the tone of this first class email that I wanted to establish a spirit of comfort and compassion. So availability for our students and for each other, office hours on Zoom when we normally have class, one-on-one appointments, responding outside of usual office hours, providing a human connection. I wanted to convey the idea that while so much was unsure, what they could rely on is me, my commitment to them, and my extension of grace and mercy when they were needed. And then in April of 2020, I had my first international Zoom meeting with a student, and that was pretty cool. He was in Mexico City. I call summer June 2020. I describe it as one long, blindingly bright summer afternoon of webinars and training. My goal was to get my bearings, learn some new skills, redesign the class from scratch, and transition from Blackboard to Brightspace. We were all in some kind of shock, but we got to a point where changes became the norm. During this time, I was working one-on-one with School of Letters students. We learned to pivot on a dime. We did not know for sure what the fall would look like, but we planned for all scenarios. While a school-sponsored training, another faculty member commented that one of her learning outcomes for all her classes this year would be establishing community. I wanted to cheer loudly and exclaim, yes, exactly. But I was on mute, so nobody heard me. September 2020. Heidi and I came together, taught fully online. We were lucky enough at Swanee where they gave us the choice. We can teach online, a hybrid, or in person. And I chose online. I admit I was not entirely ready for prime time on Zoom, but who was, honestly? And we were because of our choice, I chose online because I couldn't imagine teaching without you being able to see my mouth, because who am I if you can't see my mouth? I feel the same way about you. So we made that choice, for better or for worse. We made it work. So the limitations for me, life, the limitations inherent in living in a box, right? So I'm working from home in a room on a laptop within the Zoom box. That's at least like 4 boxes. So we muscled through, and I never conduct a class without unmuting or muting myself at an inappropriate time. We're teaching students in their dorm rooms, in a quiet corner of the library, their kitchen at home, in Pakistan. I meet their moms, I meet their dogs and their friends. I remind them to pick up their towels from the floor. What becomes clear to me as anything is that I adjusted to the virtual world out of necessity, but I am meant to be with people. And I am never as effective a teacher on Zoom than I am in the real classroom. With my students' grace and mercy, we get through it because we had to. And I am convinced that we bonded as a group because we endured this together as a community.
Thanks, Courtney. So I'm going to slip into a different perspective slightly. I'm part of this research help group, but I'm also part of, I'm a middle manager and part of another part of our division. So I'm going to look at the way we did technology support for teaching, at least a sample of that. On campus. Whoops. So just to give us a quick snapshot, we have a LIT on our campus. We're LITs, not to be confused with LIT, where we are now, and that is Library and Information Technology Services. So our library services and all of our technology, all of those services are combined. So these little ovals are representing here. And in our, you don't have to know all that, but in our little group, we are research help and information literacy, plus we are faculty technology support. And what that is are the folks who are hands-on that work with faculty, even separate from another group who is our help desk and our computer lab support. But of course, but very interconnected. There's about 40, 50 of us. So in our little group, that's what we do, and this is going to look at how we thought about March and on and on. So just thinking as the many meetings and the ways that I was involved in this, we of course had to look at behind the scenes how to move all the teaching from in person to online. Fortunately, we had already been using Blackboard, the LMS, the learning management system, for almost 20 years. So that should have been really easy, but I will note that it was just sort of a support, I would say, to most classes. Again, you heard Courtney talk about the emphasis on in-person, small classes, being together. So Blackboard was just another kind of a repository for many, a place to have some content for their courses, and also maybe interactions with quizzes, maybe discussions, but not extensive use. So this was a little different to move everybody there and to make sure that they knew what they were doing, because not everybody had even used it. We had a wide array of experience. We needed a tool for video conferencing, as everybody did, as Zoom is very happy that we all did. So here we are. And we needed to not only have all those courses, but have final exams and the new considerations that brought. And then in our world, we had quite a few departments who would have final comprehensive exams for their major, and who didn't always do that online. So anyway, many of the things that others had to deal with, we were thinking about and how to do that. And that was, of course, had to happen in just a couple weeks that we had between where spring break should have ended and where the new semester kind of began. So that was a whirlwind, and everybody all hands on deck from our LITs group to make that happen. The other way that we helped there was, again, because we have these faculty technology coordinators, we have a group of work staff who are devoted to working with particular faculty departments and buildings. And we needed them so much, right, to train faculty how to use Zoom that they'd never seen, and those who weren't familiar with Blackboard. We created a Blackboard course where all faculty were students, so that was another way, it's a little meta, I get, but another way that they could see things as a student, see how to learn. We could put a lot of content there. So again, see it, model it, live it, go in there. This group is already really used to working with faculty one-on-one, maybe, hovering over them at their computer, maybe doing some things for them, and pretty used to being contacted, but it was new to them to kind of try another service for setting up appointments. So Google Calendar is used on our campus, goes pretty well. But if you have used other services, it's nice to have something to help manage appointments. So they adopted Calendly, one of those ways to more easily set up those meetings, and in this case through Zoom, sometimes to talk about how to use Zoom, which gets a little interesting. But a lot of that happening really quickly in March, and fortunately we had a group of people and others in LITs in our bigger division that could add to that and help support that. Then, as Courtney said, we had a little more time to breathe, a little more time to plan for what might come for some things in the summer and looking ahead, as plans were just, minute by minute changing. I'm not sure exactly why, but we also thought it might be a good idea to transition to a new learning management system at this time. I mean, we had already talked about it. We had signed some things, I think, in early March. We'd already been in some meetings, and it wasn't completely new, but of course we were going to just phase it in and maybe start using it a little bit in the summer. Anyway, we fast forwarded. We did just jump on getting this implemented to be ready for fall 2020. And it feels like a whirlwind, and it was a wild plan. But we're using it. We're in Brightspace. We did it, and it was just kind of part of all the many things that we were doing. And I think we may have gotten more support and buy-in for it because we had that need for everybody to be in a space to teach online. And despite having Blackboard for many, many, many years, we weren't super happy with how it was. So this was a wild thing to do, a big switch, but it was important. It was a needed change, and we had really great support from the Brightspace folks, they're called D2L, who helped us make this happen in a matter of months. Some of that involved us getting trained. So LIT staff, including us and others, probably at least half of the folks in our group got training about how to use it, how to administer, and so on. And then a lot of that then was to help in a short time train faculty as well in how to use it, how to put their content in. And then we were really just a few steps ahead, right? Just setting it up, installing, making integrations happen, making all the course content. So just barely ahead of everybody. But so that was going on in summer. And we even had a few classes in summer who chose to use Brightspace. So we had it in action and in service while we were working on it. And it's still a wonder that it's going, but it worked out. Why not, right? That's a quick look at our front page of Brightspace and some of the courses. And I think we've been really happy with it, even if we're still reeling from, the big quick switch to it. Again, we had some summertime that we kind of could breathe. We also, again, were really focused on this Brightspace transition. But of course, as technology services and library services on campus, we were focused on all the other ways to support what fall 2020 might look like. We were still planning how that might look, planning for all the possibilities. And again, with one of our important ways to focus on this was to think about how to support faculty and just do that. So we did not have a real robust website or guides for faculty support. Again, I think it kind of goes with our hands-on close touch focus, so we didn't have as much online to point people to. Again, maybe others would have started out that way, but it took us a little while to do that. And this really focused us on, hey, let's have all these guides online. Let's make the videos. Let's show them how to use the things in quick ways. And that came together as a really robust technology guide for staff and faculty and student focus. Then as we started to say we're going to be in person as possible on campus, classrooms are going to look really different. You all know how this all looked. And so training was needed for actual things inside classrooms. Could have been things, there's a new touchpads that control things, cameras needed because we might have remote students in an in-person class, also needed microphone speakers. So we were part of making sure that those were there. That's our LITs group doing that, but also our FTCs being there to support that and say, here's how to use this. Here's a quick look at how to use this 1 week or 2 weeks or 2 days before you're going to be in this classroom. And then as fall comes along and everybody's a little nervous about how it's all going to go and work in their classroom or from home or on Zoom or from a tent, which we had set up to accommodate, spread out classrooms. So many of our classrooms are small. We had our FTC folks there live in the classrooms to help, make the thing click that didn't do what it's supposed to, or to help work the camera, or to help with sound, all those issues. And then again, other support for that. We even later in the fall got student assistants to help out in that area too, so could train them to help and support. So I think we really kind of collaborated and reached out. So many things, other things were considered and collaborated as part of our group, but I'm trying to kind of think about the ways that we supported teaching and Brightspace. Although there was much behind it that was technical, it was also a space that we thought about for how it could be. Well, the more we thought about, the instantaneous need to get online, we were also, I think, part of many conversations on campus about universal design when making classes, and consistency in instructional design in many ways that we hadn't really had those conversations before more universally through with our Blackboard service, our Blackboard system. So Brightspace as a service was a way to bring back of more focus, again, out of necessity. We all needed to talk about how classes were going to look, how this was going to work. But I think, also took into a lot of consideration as a campus how we can make this a good place for students to learn, for our faculty to know what they're doing, and for staff to help support that. So I think we were so conscientious of that and hope that will continue. I added just a few more things here just to say some of the other ways that I saw us as LITs collaborating with our campus was that we took computer lab, and again, I know many of these things you did at your campuses, just adding this as a way to see some of the ways that we collaborated. We took computer labs from being a physical space to being virtual. There is a software that made many and most of our software available to everybody who was coming in from remotely or even on campus, but that could use their own computer to use things that were previously loaded on a computer lab. We were lending equipment, so laptops to faculty who were remote and didn't have that good computer at home, or to students who needed improved Wi-Fi. And we improved Wi-Fi on our campus, so that was part of the process. We worked to caption videos as we were making them for classes and for training, and we had support from our Student Accessibility Services group to also add student workers to help that. As mentioned, with classroom support, students were also part of helping make that work. Zoom, as you all know, we're here because it's a great space to also hold events and performances, and that was true on our campus too. So it was nice to, again, have this technology solution, but that could also be a way to bring us together and see music and art in our art gallery, even if we couldn't visit, and have speakers or be in groups with students that we wouldn't maybe even normally done in person on regular days. And then Brightspace ended up being used not just for our courses and all of that, but staff and student training, so that student life, our HR, we had COVID-19 training for all staff and students, the whole campus. It took place in Brightspace, and then a lot of departments ended up using it just for their content. Their career services had special access there, and the art gallery, and so on. So I think it was nice to see the collaboration and the way that the things that are just normally tools or just things that are happening behind the scenes, like making the internet work well or making this equipment work well, was seen as more important, more collectively thought about, and became, just a way that we were working with so many people on campus. To me, that meant a lot of meetings, and I know that I can't even remember sometimes how exhausted I was from being in those. But I was home the whole time, and I was a part of so much of campus groups who were planning for the fall, campus technology planning, campus, so I felt like some of those things, even though they were through these little boxes, I still had a lot of input and a lot more, maybe more than I would in a regular day. Just one last shot of some of our folks that are in LITs. You're on Zoom, we're in Zoom. Why do we need to see it? But anyway, just some of our folks in the boxes, because we met as a group a little more often too in this time, just to kind of see each other, as so many were in separate spaces. And again, there's about 40, 50 of us. So so it was just us getting to do more of what we usually do, but I think getting more ways that we could make those things important for this community in this really, really strange time.
Thanks, Heidi. Now I'm going to talk about videos and tutorials that we made. We started out the pandemic, as we mentioned, with two questions. How can we create a community presence in an online environment? And how can we keep learning active and engaging in a mostly online environment? And we've heard a lot from Courtnay about kind of the side of that, engaging with students in the library class that we had in both the spring and the fall of 2020. And we heard from Heidi about working on the technology side of connecting community and learning and all of this. Right after the pandemic shut everything down into summer 2020, we worked on creating a web presence. We used the Spring Share guide here that gave directions for how to take library services and put them online, using chat functions, appointment functions, all of these things. Some of the challenges were using the SpringShare apps, but thankfully they're fairly intuitive and SpringShare provides good help. It all went pretty smoothly. It took a while, but I do think it's been effective. Students have made appointments, we've gotten a lot of chat engagement, and faculty have used the form for instruction that we made, which we also created last summer. It's been really handy because we can just drop this one URL into Zoom meetings, into emails, LibGuides, etc. This does feel like it's been a way that we have created a virtual space for community, for people to come and find us and see that, hey, we're people. We've also worked on videos. So especially last summer when we had our School of Letters coming, it's a graduate program that Sewanee has every year. For the first time ever, they were going to be online. And we wanted to make people as comfortable as possible coming to us to talk to us in this online space. So after spring semester ended, we had some time to plan and work on intro videos for ourselves and for library resources. These were some of the first videos that we had made in a while. And so our first obstacle was finding a way to record ourselves and our screens. Tech Services suggested we use Panopto, a new software the university had recently acquired to create video of classes during the pandemic. With Panopto, we were able to record and edit video and audio, but not separately, only video and audio together. In order to complete our first video, I ended up using iMovie to put our introduction videos that we'd each made separately and the screen recording that I had made of our research help website together with our intro and conclusion slides. And you can see our intro slide here. iMovie was easy and helpful, but it's only available for free for Mac users. So if we wanted to find something that was available for people who didn't have Macs, we had to go elsewhere. I tried out different free editors that would be accessible to users without a Mac, but many of them, like Screencast-O-Matic, left watermarks on the final video in the free version. So I ended up using iMovie to edit all of our videos, but I still consider it an inelegant solution. In August every year, we have a new faculty orientation. In August of 2020, this had to be a virtual orientation. Many of the new faculty weren't even at Sewanee and couldn't come to the library. So I created a video tour of the library for these new faculty. This was exciting because this was the first time that I had recorded footage and added music. I just used my phone to record the library space. It was hard to know what to include. Fitting everything in was a little tricky. And like holding the camera so that it didn't make people seasick was also one of the challenges of this. I found music on freemusicarchive.com, which has a lot of upbeat instrumental music that is great for these kinds of videos. In this video, I recorded video and audio separately, which worked well. I've done this a number of times since, recording a script and then aligning it with photos, screenshots, or even screen recordings. When we made these videos, we put them all in YouTube. YouTube was great as a place to host everything, to organize it. You can see it's laid out very clearly here. It's easy to grab a link or embed it somewhere, so we can put them in LibGuides, we can put them in tutorials, we can just email them to people. It's really handy. YouTube makes captioning easy, which is a big reason that we wanted to use it. I used the auto sync function for most of my captions. It gives you a text box and allows you to just drop your script into the text box. And then YouTube does the alignments for you. It takes a while, usually takes like 3 to 6 hours. I kept coming back and being like, are you done yet? And it would be like, no. But eventually it gives you these editable captions. And this is great because when I record with the script, a lot of times I change a few words here or there, and then I can go through these captions and change those words in the captions so that everything lines up nicely. So my takeaways from the video process. I've learned to record audio and video separately most of the time. If I'm doing a database demo, for example, I might still record the audio and video together because they're so closely connected. I do one take and fix everything in editing. I'm going to tell you a trick that I learned in a webinar last fall. If you make a big clap while you're recording, so let's say I say something and then it's a mistake and I want to fix it, I can clap. And then that shows up in the audio as a spike. Heidi, could you go back to the next slide for a second? So you can see at the bottom of the screenshot here, there's the audio, and there would be a big spike where I made a clap. And then I would be able to know where I made the mistake and fix it. I've also learned that music fills the pauses. As I mentioned before, I use freemusicarchive.com, highly recommend it. I use stock images, which can be helpful when explaining broader concepts. So if I'm starting out a video by talking about like the research process, I might just include a stock image of a student at a computer. I get my stock images from Unsplash and Pexels, which are free stock images that just involve attribution. We haven't tracked engagement with our videos. There are numbers that show up on YouTube. I'm not sure how helpful they are because I have watched these videos so many times. I'm afraid of how that interferes with the numbers. But we have gotten positive feedback from those with whom we've shared them. Through these videos and the website, we were able to be present in more areas of our virtual space. During the academic year 2020-2021, I also worked on tutorials. I actually started working on tutorials immediately after the pivot to online, but there's kind of a learning curve. It was hard for me to get a feel for making tutorials, especially for a general audience. When Philosophy 307 in spring 2021 wanted library instruction, but the whole class never met together at the same time, I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity for me to develop my tutorial making skills. So I put together this tutorial for philosophy, or for the political philosophy class, finding a conversation in political philosophy on LibWizard. And I promise this is not a SpringShare advertisement. There are plenty of great tools that you can use to create a tutorial. I would think that Google Forms would be great for creating something similar to what I made here. I was able to design a longer activity for this than I would have been able to do in class. In class, I would have spent a long time demoing things like the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy or Scopus, which I also brought into this. And in the tutorial, I was able to throw the students into an activity where they had to look at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and they had to look at Scopus and find citations for a paper. So it also made things more active. And in that, it also integrated instruction with a task that would help students begin research. Students were researching a topic, trying to find a topic from the beginning of the tutorial, instead of sitting through a demo that they might tune out of and then working on something on their own that they might not be sure how to do because they weren't paying attention to the demo. The challenge here is that there are so many steps involved in making a tutorial. I kept skipping things and I would have to go back and say, oh, I need an in-between step for these two things. Finding examples was a little tricky. Being not too familiar with political philosophy, I had to look a lot of things up and learn some things, which is great. That's one of my favorite parts of the job. Before I could create the tutorial that would engage students in this class. And then troubleshooting. Thankfully, the professor was really helpful in this area, and he was able to say, oh, hey, I'm not sure how the students are getting from step A to step B. Could you fill that in a little bit more? And so I was able to fix that. So what I've learned from tutorials, I've learned to make them incremental. Each step builds on the previous step. Make them productive. Students work on an actual research task, so they come away from the tutorial with something to start with. Make them active. Give students lots of chances to apply and respond to the websites, the ideas, the concepts that they're learning. Make them simple. Each task is simple and straightforward. Together, they form something more complex. I'm still working on this one. Make them reflective. I use reflection as my main form of assessment, and students, I found, are willing to talk about how things went if you're just asking them to kind of describe things, especially if they're frustrated, which is great feedback. Tutorials, I've found, allow me to immediately recreate activities I've read about, and if you're like me, you spend a lot of time reading about activities that other librarians have done or hearing about them in some way, and this is a great way to get my hands dirty immediately with like trying to figure out the activity to see what works, what doesn't, and adjust things for the future. We're moving into, oh, I have one more thing in my section, and then we're moving into our final section. I wanted to include some of the feedback that I got from the political philosophy tutorial. Especially, I want to highlight this fourth one along here that says, this activity actually helped me find a topic I'm really curious about. And this for me was kind of a sign that like the tutorial did something well. If I can help students find something that they're curious about, something that they can walk away from the tutorial saying, oh, hey, I really want to know more about this. That for me is a sign of success. All right. And now we're moving into our takeaways. So we're thinking about kind of what we've learned as a whole, trying to get an idea of like what reflection on this first 15 months of the pandemic has taught us about who we are as a research help group and who we are in our individual processes. So we each wrote individual takeaways, and then we're going to kind of synthesize them together. But from her experience teaching and helping students, Courtnay reflects that students long for personal interaction, no matter the learning environment. She says, as an instructor, I found that the smallest of gestures on my part, an email, text, using office hours to listen to their concerns, were worth the effort that it communicated. Clearly, this message, completing a class project is important, yes, but my and the school's concern lies primarily with the students' overall well-being. Mercy and grace, grace and mercy. Thinking about her experience helping the campus move from in-person onto Zoom and from Blackboard to Brightspace, Heidi says, moving to online teaching and learning was a success in part because all of our support was focused on the learner, whether that was the students in class, staff preparing to train others, or a faculty member new to teaching online. We all gain skills that will complement teaching in person and will inform the way we support technology use in the classroom in the future. My experience bringing research help online in our webpage, our videos, and our tutorials shows me that engagement is possible. We developed skills and resources that will be helpful even when we're back in person. The videos and tutorials are useful as preparation for students coming to class and as follow-ups or additional tools. And because these can be used before or after or in addition to a one-shot class. They might help us break out of the one-shot pattern and make learning more holistic. Our collective reflections can be synthesized into 2 takeaways. Connection is important. The virtual environment is a barrier, but this barrier that makes these connections harder for us also makes us take more time, be more intentional, and reminds us of the empathy necessary in our roles. And working to engineer connections also helps us build this into all of our efforts, to build connections into classes, the learning interface, web pages, videos, and tutorials. What was lost and is lost in the pandemic cannot be replaced, but we can still see gains that we have made among those losses. Here's our contact email. We want you to feel free to email us, and I couldn't resist one last call back to our title. And we welcome your questions and comments. We welcome, especially, I saw in the chat, some people were saying, oh, like this resonated with me, this felt like my experience. Please share your experiences with us as well. And that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
I did see that we had a question from Erin about library input on the LMS. Erin asks, did the library have any input on choosing an LMS? And I was wondering if Heidi, you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
You know, yes and no. I think that, again, our library services are connected with our tech services. So there's a group of us that meet about kind of the bigger things that impact us. But I think in this case, I had worked with Blackboard over the years, both as using it as an instructor and then having a more administrator role along the way. And I knew of dissatisfaction with it, and that, so I knew and had input on that side of it. A couple other staff members or managers saw the Brightspace at a local HES organization meeting and just really loved it. And I think just instead of with timing, instead of evaluating 7 other things, we knew that we needed something different and better. So we didn't have quite the same process we might have had. No, we didn't have direct involvement, but we had a say in yes, should we go with something new? So that helped, I think, be a part of it.
Well, and I will say, change here at Sewanee moves at the pace of a glacier, right? Except we found out what we could do if we really had to do it. And so when we were talking about phasing in a new LMS, it was like, well, maybe some teachers will volunteer to use it in the fall, or some people will make the move mostly in the spring. We got it done in 3 months, and some were dragged kicking and screaming, but everybody knew that we were all working towards the same goal, which was just getting these kids back together and get them back in class. So it's amazing. It's a pretty amazing feat when I look back on it.
You do have a question in the Q&A from Sally. Do you ever use Merlot and Content Builder to create tutorials? Merlot is free and like Google for education.
I haven't heard of those, but that's great. This is one reason I wanted to talk about tutorials in this session, because I was like, other people will give me some of their ideas. So Merlot and Content Builder, are they separate? Thank you.
And question from Lonnie, the class is for credit. Yes, it is. It is taken, but it is available to all students, whether they're freshmen, sophomores, juniors, or seniors. I would love it if I could get everybody when they're freshmen and sophomores, because I have had that conversation with seniors. Once they realize all the databases and all the different ways that we can research, they'll look at me like, I can't believe this was here all the time and I didn't know. So when we catch them as seniors, sometimes it feels like it's a little too late. So I like to get them when they are freshmen or sophomores. And I'm really interested in hearing, just if you guys look at our email, the research@sewanee.edu. I'd love if you wanted to follow up later, just to tell us about your journey through the last 15 months and what it's been like for you, because we've all been in our little boxes, right? And I love seeing and hearing from new people. So please feel free to share.
Yes, and I know that lots of people really resonated with your experiences. Oh, we have one more question. Did you talk about and or teach credibility of information as it related to the pandemic?
So, so what was really interesting is we found, or I found an article that had been published by a peer-reviewed online journal. It was an Elsevier product, and it was a journal article by a biologist at the University of Pittsburgh saying that if you wore a jade amulet, it might prevent you from contracting COVID. And it had been peer-reviewed. And several people caught that on Twitter, and there was like a brief Twitter storm, but that was really fun doing the post-mortem. I mean, it was pulled and it was retracted, but it was published. And so that was really interesting to talk to my students about that, because it's like, we want you to use peer-reviewed stuff. Peer-reviewed stuff should be able to take to the bank. Well, they did publish this and it did exist. So yes, we did talk about credibility. Absolutely. And then, of course, we had the, election year, and just there was no absence of material, for sure.